All right, what's up, guys? Today we're talking about Halloween. It's been a super huge topic this year. It probably is every year, but it just seems like for some reason this year, because of the reel posted by Forrest Frank, Ryan Miller's interview with the ex-satanic occult leader, and a bunch of ex-witch videos talking about how Halloween is a horrible, horrible holiday, that has sparked a lot of, let's just say, controversy amongst the church. And there's been a ton of response videos of people saying things like, no, it's actually rooted in All Hallows Eve, which has Catholic origins, and so actually it's a Christian holiday that's been overtaken by the world. But today we're gonna get into, can Christians actually celebrate it? Or maybe I should say, should Christians actually celebrate Halloween? But what's going to be different about this video than any other video that you've seen on this is we are not even going to talk about the history of Halloween, because it doesn't matter. Who cares whether it started in pagan tradition or Christian tradition? What matters is, what is Halloween today? And what does the Bible say about Christians partaking in things like Halloween? And this is not only going to apply to Halloween. This is going to apply to Christmas, Santa Claus. It's going to apply to the Easter Bunny on Easter. This is going to apply to anything that Christians could or could not do that maybe isn't inherently sin, but may also not be helpful toward the furthering of the kingdom. So let's get into it. Our main text in the scriptures today is going to be 1 Corinthians chapter 8. In the city of Corinth, they had these marketplaces, and in these marketplaces there would be meat that you could go and buy, like a grocery store or a farmer's market. And some of this meat had been offered to an idol, just not consumed. So in the city of Corinth, of course, it was a polytheistic culture. They had many gods. And so sometimes some of these gods would require a sacrifice of meat, but it wouldn't be consumed. It wouldn't be burnt or totally consumed. It would just be set there and offered, but then taken down and then sold later on. Well, the Christians were having a tough time with this because they thought, oh my gosh, if this meat that I'm about to eat has been offered to an idol, then maybe I shouldn't eat it at all. And so Paul is going to clear this up in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and this directly applies to whether or not a Christian can even celebrate Halloween to begin with. So let's get into this. The first verse is where the main crux of this whole message lies, and Paul says this: "Now concerning things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge." So he says we all know what's going on with this food and with these idols. We know that they're not good. We know that it's not good to offer food to idols. But he says this: knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. And if anyone thinks that he knows anything, he knows nothing, yet as he ought to know. So what Paul is getting at here is, look, we all know what is happening, but us trying to use that knowledge to tear down our brother or sister because of their lack of knowledge is not edifying. We need to approach this, Paul says, in love. And this is the same thing we need to do with Halloween. I've seen so many comment sections on these videos of Christians getting in there and just trashing each other. One Christian will get in there and say something beautiful like, I'm not celebrating Halloween for the very first time this year, and this person's so excited about it. And it never fails, right below that is some troll who says, well, actually, you could celebrate it if you wanted to because you're misinformed, and it actually started in All Hallows Eve. And they just rob this person of their beautiful conviction that they had to avoid Halloween. And on the other side of things, someone will say something like, I'm going out and dressing up, in a, How to Train Your Dragon costume, and we're going to eat some candy with some friends. And someone will comment below that, you're not supposed to partake in any pagan rituals. That's knowledge without love. That's not edifying anybody. That's puffing up. That makes you feel good in the comments section, right? Paul says, cut that out. But if anyone loves God, this one is known by him. Therefore, concerning the eating of things offered to idols, we know that an idol is nothing, and there is no other God but one. So Paul's saying, look, we know that these gods, these idols, that this food has been offered to are not real. They're fake. Right? They may have a demon behind them, but the God is not real. Same thing with Halloween. Every skeleton statue that I see, every ghost, every demonic piece of imagery that I see on Halloween, that's not real. Now, it does, though, represent something. And this is what Paul's going to go on to say. So we don't want to take away from the fact that the skeletons and the wicked kind of imagery, the evil, scary imagery on Halloween, it does represent something, even though it has no power over me as a believer. It has zero power over me because I'm covered in the blood of Jesus. No demon can inhabit a believer of Jesus. No power can control me, only by the will of God, like we see in the book of Job. Satan asks God's permission to touch one of his anointed. So I'm safe on Halloween. I have nothing to worry about biblically. But let's see what Paul goes on to say about this. For even if there were so-called gods, whether in heaven or on earth, as there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, of whom are all things, and we for him, and one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things and through whom we live. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. For some, with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. So Paul's saying, look, we know that none of this stuff is a problem, right? Just like I know that Halloween's it's not a problem. It's not causing me to sin. And I know I'm not affected by it. But maybe some of these ex-witches or the former occult leader, maybe he doesn't feel that same way because he came from that. He knows how dark it is. And so maybe all this imagery used on Halloween reminds him of that. And it brings him back to that place. And so maybe to him in his heart, God has said, stay far, far, far away from this. And he's doing that. And that's good. And I don't want to take that away from him, right? He needs to do that. But for those of you believers out there who know that there's nothing going to harm you on Halloween, remember, not everyone has that knowledge. And some people, if they dress up in a costume or they, carve a jack-o'-lantern, if they do that, they don't understand what you understand, and their conscience is going to defile them. That's what God cares about. God cares about if they're obeying him. He cares about their conscience. If you're doing something and you know it's not godly, then you need to avoid it. Imagine if you used to be an alcoholic, and now you've decided you're never going to walk down the liquor aisle in any store. Is that really necessary? No, of course it's not necessary, but you, coming from a place of alcoholism, feel very strongly that you need to avoid it so extremely and so carefully that you're not even going to go near the aisle where it is. Another believer could look at you and say the same thing. Oh, well, that's legalistic, or that's silly, or you don't need to do that. The alcohol has no power over you. And you're saying, no, look, you don't know where I came from. This is what God told me to do. See, it's your conscience. It's what God has told you to do. So that's what Paul's saying. Look, not everyone knows that, not everyone has that confidence. Not everyone knows that this can't harm them. Some people come from a different place. Then he goes on in verse 8 and says, but food does not condemn us to God. Neither if we eat are we the better, or if we do not eat are we the worse. He's saying it doesn't matter if you eat the food offered to idols or not. It's not going to change anything. But what is going to change is your conscience toward God. If God has told you not to eat that food offered to idols, if he's told you not to partake in Halloween, if he's told you not to go down the liquor aisle in the grocery store, you need to obey that. That is your priority. And if he's given you liberty to do any one of those things, then take that liberty. But don't use that liberty. I better not get ahead of myself. He's going to say that. Let's wait till Paul says it. He'll say it better than me. But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block for those who are weak. For if anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish for whom Christ died. So Paul's saying, look, this is serious. What if you, because you know that you can do this lawfully and it's not against God, what if you start doing it? What if you start eating that food? And a weaker brother who doesn't know yet, or maybe is in a different place, comes in and sees you eating that, and then they say, oh, well, okay, I can do it then. I guess if they can do it, I can do it. And then they go against their conscience. They go against what God has told them to do because you're doing it. Now you have caused them to stumble and disobey God. But when you thus sin against the brethren and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble. So that is really the foundation of it, guys. And this comes to so many things. You could apply this to modesty. What God has shown you to wear may not be what he's shown everybody to wear. It's not what you put on that defiles you. It's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you. It is what comes out of you that defiles you. And so don't this Halloween season condemn somebody who wants to avoid it. Celebrate them. Just like you would celebrate an alcoholic, your buddy. Let's say your buddy's an alcoholic. He's sitting right next to you and you're about to go into the gas station. He says, man, I can't go in. I can't go in. You'd say, you know what? Good job. Good job. I'm so proud of you for that conviction, right? Why don't we do the same thing with Halloween? Why don't we do the same thing with Easter? Some Christian family says we don't do any Santa in our home, not one, because we're so passionate about not doing Santa because we want to keep it only about Jesus. Why don't we just celebrate them? Amazing. I'm so glad you have that conviction for Jesus. And then on the other side of things, let's say I'm the family that doesn't do Santa, but my kids are playing with another kid and they're talking about Santa. That's okay. I always tell my kids, we don't really do Santa in our house, but my kids are always talking to their friends and a lot of our friends do Santa. And so I'm like, you know what, that's great. Santa's so fun. And I always tell my kids this, Santa is a symbol and he's a fun symbol and it's excellent. And we are not gonna tear down that family because they have liberty to do that. They're not robbing Christmas of Jesus. They're not doing that. And so 1 Corinthians chapter 8, guys, read this for yourself. Read 7 and 9 while you're at it. And I hope this helps this Halloween season.